This video will go over the concept of error bars and other chart elements. As a reminder, these are intended to be watched in full and in order, so go back and watch the other videos as needed. And again, you can always pause, rewind, and rewatch on your own time or at your own pace. The video before this was an intro to column or bar graphs. The next thing we'll do is add error bars to our graph. But first, we need to understand what error bars are and why it's important to incorporate them into your charts. Error bars are a representation of the variability of a data set or the uncertainty. So they give us an idea of how precise a measurement is. In other words, we can get an idea of how spread apart or precise data points are. Let's take this hypothetical chart. The blue column is a value of 25, while the orange is at 51. That is the average value of all of the data that we have in this data set. If we're given a data point that has the value of 38, would we know which group it belongs to? We have to ask two main questions. Are the error bars overlapping, and are the two data sets significantly different? If we draw a line on the top of the blue error bar and the bottom of the orange error bar, we see that the range of the majority of values do not overlap between the two data sets. And if we draw a line from the data point in either direction, we see that it is most likely that this point belongs to the orange data set as it's out of range of the blue set. So, no, there is no overlap. Then we ask if this difference is significant. The lack of overlap would be a good sign that the data sets are significantly different. However, additional statistical tests are needed to confirm that conclusion. But in a situation where the error bars overlap, we can draw a line going in either direction. And the data point could reasonably belong to either data set. So yes, there is overlapping. And we wouldn't be able to distinguish between data points from the different data sets, likely making them not significantly different. But again, a formal statistical analysis on the data is needed for a conclusion on this. Now that you understand the purpose of them, let's add error bars to our charts. Make sure your chart is still selected. Under the Design tab, locate the Add Chart Elements dropdown, then Error Bars, which gives more error bar options. Again, Add Chart Element, Error Bars, and more error bar options. Select SEX1 and then OK. This opens a side window allowing you to look at all the options regarding error bars. From here, you will make sure you use an error bar in both directions with an end cap. Customize the standard deviation values by selecting Specify Values. I want to point out that within the sidebar, there are 3 tabs to choose from. If for some reason the option you want is not showing up, make sure you're on the right tab. You want the Options tab. And again, make sure both directions and caps for the end styles are selected, and specify values for the error bar amount. As always, delete the value Excel already has in both the positive and the negative error values, and then select the standard deviation values from the formatted table for SEX1 for both the positive and the negative values. We're making a lot of statistical assumptions here, but that's outside of the scope of this. For now, we will say our calculated standard deviations are going to be equal in both directions for our data set. We'll click OK, and the negative error values for the same space, and click OK. You're going to repeat the same process for SEX2, making sure that the standard deviation you highlight is that for SEX2, not for SEX1. No graph is complete without a title and axis labels. To put those in, we again go to the Chart Tools, Design, and on the far left, you see Add Chart Elements. When you click that, there's a large drop down of options. Select what you want to add and enter the value or text in the function box. Now on to scatter plots. So let's go back to our graph for selection. If our first graph, we want to compare measurements between groups, we want to look at the other relationships of weight and age of the bears. So we've selected the relationship scatter plot. Now that you know what type of graph, you need to decide what group you want to represent. Excel calls these series. So those series, again, as a reminder, is Sex1 and Sex2. For scatter plots, you also need to know the series as well as the distinction between your independent and dependent variables. The independent variable always goes on the x-axis on the bottom, while the dependent variable goes on the y-axis, the vertical axis. To distinguish between your independent variable and your dependent variable for your y, you have to ask yourself which variable cannot be changed by another. For example, age or time. Neither can be manipulated no matter how much experimentation you do. This would be the independent variable compared to the dependent variable, which can be affected by another or other factors. For example, test scores could be it could be the dependent variable, and there are several factors that could affect your final score. For example, how much sleep you got, how much you studied, how much have you eaten, how's your energy level, are you hungry, etc. An easy way to remember which variable is which, the dependent or the independent, insert the variable names into this phrase. And that should help clarify because it just won't make sense if it's not the right order. In our case, we want to examine the relationship between age and weight within each sex, which makes more sense. Age causes a change in weight, and it isn't possible that weight could cause a change in age. Or the alternative, age causes a change in weight causes a change in age, and it isn't possible that age could cause a change in weight. That sounds silly, right? So in this exercise, age is the independent variable since there is nothing we can do about it. And weight is then going to be our dependent variable. Since weight could depend on age, the older you are, the larger you are, things like that. The next video will be the specifics of how to get into scatter plots and adding trend lines.